A few days before Passover, I received a text from my cousin informing me that he and his family wouldn't be attending the Seder at my parents' home in Connecticut. It wasn't entirely unexpected, but it still hurt. I care deeply about my cousin and his family. We have children of similar ages. We bond over driveway basketball, hiking in the Watchung Reservation, and just being together. But this has been an especially difficult year, as our differing views on the situation in Israel and Gaza have created a silent strain. Since October 7th, whenever we've gotten together, the interactions have been polite, respectful, but undeniably awkward. The ongoing war has loomed in the background, the unspoken elephant in the room, complicating our relationship. So when he texted to say that he wouldn't be coming to our family Seder, a large, lively, and what I consider an inclusive gathering, I was deeply disappointed. The reason was clear. He feared that the Seder conversations would turn into a debate about Israel's actions in Gaza and the path forward. So what did I do when I received the text message? To be honest, I'm disappointed in myself. I should have responded to his text with a phone call. I should have reached out, opened up a conversation. But instead, I ignored it, choosing not to rock the boat. And because we didn't have that conversation, he didn't come to Passover or my sermon on Zionism last week, which was painful for my family, and I'm sure for his family as well. I know that I'm not the only one facing this kind of situation. Many of you have shared similar experiences with me. The pain of fractured relationships with family members and friends who think differently than you, and how you are nervous to bring up those differences. There's a sense of walking on eggshells and avoiding sensitive topics. These tensions have surfaced at Thanksgiving dinners, Hanukkah gatherings, and I'm sure just recently at the Rosh Hashanah table too. And it's not just about Israel and Gaza. The conversations, or lack thereof, often revolve around politics. Opinions on Harris and Trump, reproductive rights, immigration, and other political touchstones. But they can also extend to more localized or personal issues. Feelings of a disappointment when a friend doesn't reach out during a crisis or violates a confidence. Concern over a family member struggling with addiction or a mental health concern. Or divisions about how to best care for an aging relative or end-of-life decisions. These are difficult issues to confront. Far too often, we don't do it head-on. We choose silence over potentially uncomfortable conversations. Over the next 24 hours, we will turn to our Machzor and recite the public vidui, the confession. We will say these words multiple times. Achet shechatanu lefanecha. For the sin we have committed with our words, we ask forgiveness. Achet shechatanu lefanecha. For the sin of speaking maliciously about others, we ask forgiveness. It's interesting that our tradition focuses on words we say, but remains silent about the words we withhold. Sometimes the words we don't speak can cause just as much pain. Rabbi Neil Hirsch suggests we add a new al-chet to our liturgy. Al-chet shechatanu lifanecha, for the sin of avoidance, for not saying what could or should have been said, for not speaking openly and honestly with those I love. Al-chet shechatanu lifanecha, for the times I lowered my eyes instead of meeting the gaze of someone whose views challenged me, for the times I changed the subject, and perhaps most painfully, for the relationships I've neglected because of differing viewpoints. So why don't we have these conversations, especially with those who we care most about? Part of it is fear of conflict, fear of saying the wrong thing, or fear of deepening the divide. We worry that engaging in difficult conversations will lead to arguments, hurt feelings, or even damaged relationships. It feels safer to avoid the subject entirely, to stay in the realm of small talk or neutral topics. But in doing so, we create an emotional distance, allowing unresolved tensions to fester beneath the surface. The very silence we think is preserving harmony can end up widening the gap between us. There's also the discomfort of vulnerability. To engage in real, meaningful dialogue, we must be willing to expose our own beliefs, doubts, and uncertainties. It requires humility, the ability to listen, and the openness of being challenged or even changed by another person's perspective. This is no easy task, especially when the issues at hand, whether political, personal, or deeply emotional, strike at the core of our identities. By avoiding these conversations, we may protect ourselves from short-term discomforts, but we also miss the opportunity for growth and understanding. Silence may feel safer, but ultimately it leads to separation, while honest and respectful conversation, though difficult, can offer a path to closeness and growth. There are plenty of books written about how to have a difficult conversation. Many of them are New York Times bestsellers, including Difficult Conversations Don't Have to Be Difficult, and The Discomfort Zone, and Let's Talk About Hard Things, life-changing conversations that connect us. All of these books discuss strategies, including making sure your conversation is at the right time and place, acknowledging your own emotions and that of the person you're talking to, and being on the same eye level in the space as well. Yet more than the New York Times best-selling books, our Jewish tradition offers guidance and examples on how to navigate these discussions too. A well-known Talmudic story recounts a 3-year dispute between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. Each believed that their halakha, their Jewish law, supported their respective viewpoints. And after extensive debate, a Ba'al Kol, a heavenly voice, intervenes, proclaiming, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both perspectives are the words of the living God. However, the Ba'al Kol concluded that the law would follow the rulings of Beit Hillel. This raises the question, if both schools embody divine truth, why is the law determined by the house of Hillel? The rabbis teach that Beit Hillel is followed because its members were kind, modest and open-minded. They study not only their own rulings, but also those of the house of Shammai, and humbly prioritize mentioning Shammai's opinions before their own. Beit Hillel recognized the value of multiple perspectives and demonstrated the understanding in their self-presentation and interactions. Crucially, they remained at the table even when the conversations became difficult, refusing to storm out in frustration. So how can we model our debates, our conversations like that of the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai? Number one, openness. The followers of Beit Hillel were willing to listen to the viewpoints of Beit Shammai and even gave precedence to their opinions before offering their own. This requires an openness to hearing the other side, not just waiting for our turn to speak. How often do we enter a conversation with our talking points ready to speak and not ready to listen? In order to have these difficult conversations, it means creating space for the other person to feel heard and respected, even when their view differs from us. Number two, creating a sense of sacredness. Judaism teaches that the concept of machloket l'shem shamayim, disagreements for the sake of heaven, which echoes the disputes between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. According to the Bakol, both of their viewpoints were right. How can we acknowledge that none of us have a monopoly on truth, and that there may be wisdom in viewpoints we hadn't considered? Our conversations need to be approached with a sense of sacredness and purpose. Our goal of these difficult conversations should not be to win an argument, but to engage in a way that leads to greater understanding and growth. Before we speak, we should ask ourselves, am I entering this conversation with a desire to listen and understand? Or am I trying to convince or change the other person? Am I open to the possibility that their perspective might hold truth, even if I disagree with it? And lastly, being in relationship. Judaism teaches us that the value of persistence in dialogue. The disputes between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai lasted for years. These weren't one-time debates, but ongoing conversations that required patience, dedication, and a willingness to return to the table again and again, even when the discussions were challenging. Our tradition encourages us to stay engaged, to continue seeking understanding and connection, even when the process is uncomfortable. We must remain committed to the relationship, even when the conversation is hard. The disputes between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai never led to a breakdown in their relationship, and neither should our disagreements with those we love. We can disagree without disconnecting, and we can seek understanding without needing to agree on everything. Rabbi Sharon Brous, our Cold Tzedek speaker for the upcoming year, shares a story in her book, The Amen Effect, about a difficult conversation that she had with an Israeli ultra-Orthodox rabbi. Brous writes, "After a lecture I was giving, the rabbi came up to me and raged and accused me of spreading lies that malign him and his community. After several minutes, he takes a breath and says, in a much quieter voice, that he's not only angry, he's hurt. I'm stunned by this admission of vulnerability. I asked if he'd be willing to sit down with me to help me understand his perspective a little bit more. And then something extraordinary happens. I sit down with this man, by most measures, my ideological foe, and we eat lunch and talk for nearly 3 hours. Aside from the shared appreciation for sweet kugel, we find very little common ground. It's not just that we disagree. I find his views very dangerous, and I'm certain he feels the same about mine. But when you sit with a person for nearly 3 hours, it's hard to hold him as a caricature. I listen to him, and he seems to listen to me. 2 years after our conversation, I read in the paper that the same rabbi has broken with his colleagues to speak out publicly against a dangerous, violent religious extremism emerging in parts of the Jewish community. What makes him speak out now? Associates attribute his change of heart to a couple of encouragers over the past few years. One of those, they report, was the lunch he had with me. While I'm encouraging us to have these hard conversations tonight, I also realize that there are some people that we may not be able to sit down with. People that have caused so much pain, so much hardship, that creating space might not be possible. So for tonight, I'm focusing on the people that we currently have relationships with. Our families, friends, members of this congregation, that we think that there's a possibility to sit down. And while at times I don't have these difficult conversations, and I too try to avoid them, over this past year, I pushed myself to sit down with people that I'm in relationship with and share my challenges, discomforts, and my disappointments. Late last fall, Rabbi Appel and I sat down with the leadership of a social justice organization that we have partnered with closely over the years. We were disappointed with their lack of comments about the growing anti-Semitism in our country after October 7th. Their silence was deafening. We sat down and we shared.